Hello my quilting friends. Hope everybody's doing really great today. It's a beautiful fall day here in the North Carolina mountains. Have you ever looked at a quilt pattern that was just gorgeous and you really wanted it, but it was made with foundation paper piecing and you said, nope, don't want to learn how to do that? Well, foundation paper piecing is super easy, and we're going to teach you in this video tutorial today how to do it.
Welcome to Flash Fiction Mystery Quilt. Hi, I'm Linda Smith. And I'm Sue Ellen Jennings.
To start paper piecing, you'll need a few basic supplies. A piece of cardboard and a cereal box. This is a Girl Scout cookie box and it's just cut to a simple square. Elmer's glue stick or pins, your rotary cutter, and a ruler that has a plainly marked 1/4 inch. Paper cutting scissors and iron. Optional items that you can use for paper piecing are this little ruler called Add a Quarter. It has a 1/4 inch raised area, and then it goes down to a very thin edge for folding the paper. Now, again, this is optional. These are inexpensive. These Add a Quarter rulers are, I don't know, $10, $11, and you get 2 in a pack. One's a long one and one is a short one. But to take its place, the simple piece of cardboard works just fantastic. So you'll want to start by cutting out your paper piecing pattern. And you do not have to cut on the lines. In fact, it's a little better to cut off and outside the lines, simply so you have extra paper to work with. I'm gonna cut mine out real quick. My particular pattern has a lot of sections in it, and that's fine because all paper piecing works exactly the same. There is always a number 1 for every single piece, and that's where you start, is with number 1. And the second rule for paper piecing is that your number 1 always goes face up. So you put your fabric on the back side of the paper, covering that entire area of number 1 and a 1/4 inch bigger all the way around. So I'm going to show you how to do this. If you notice, this little strip has a number 1 as well, and as does this one. They all have number 1s, and they all will get sewn on to the back side of a paper. All number 1s, the first piece of fabric goes face up. From then on out, every piece of fabric will go face down. Let's sew my first A1 piece. So my particular pattern is color coded. I have cream, green, yellow, and red. If your pattern is not color coded when you print it out, then you will need to write the colors in on each block so that you know exactly what color you're going to need to be sewing in that section. And you would just write, I don't know, orange, purple, blue, whatever. So you would write on each strip that you had to sew the color that you needed. My first piece, A1, is cream. You want to get a piece of fabric big enough to cover 1/4 of an inch over your top line, which is this one right here, and cover all the way outside to the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And that's usually the tricky part, is getting it big enough to cover. Most people always underestimate, and you want to go too big rather than too small. You can also hold this up to a light and you can see where the lines are on the paper so that you know you have every piece covered on that. And so I see that this needs to be right here, and that's what I'm going to cut. So now I'm just going to flip this over, hold it up to the light, put it on the back side, face side up. Make sure that everything is covered and that I have 1/4 of an inch. And I can see through it with my light that I have right over here. And I know that it is coming over 1/4 of an inch past this line between A1 and A2. And I am simply going to glue it down right there. Now you can use a pen if you want to. I prefer putting a dot of glue on mine. To hold it in place. It is face up, as you can see, and it's glued on. And I'm going to flip it over and turn my light around again so that you can see how it's covered. There's the line right here between A1 and A2, and my fabric is way past it, 1/4 of an inch at least, which is exactly what you want. Face up. Always number one goes face up. Now you need to look for piece 2. My piece 2 is green, so I will need a green piece of fabric big enough to cover that. It will go face down. And I'm just sort of going to line up with this because I know it's 1/4 of an inch over, and that's where I want to be. The only thing I don't know is if it's going to be wide enough to cover my green square. And I'm just going to fold it over like this and look at it. And yes, it covers it wonderfully. So now I can put it back down and just cut it off. You got to be careful though that you do not cut your paper pattern while you're just snipping around here. There we go. And we're going to go to the machine now, and we are going to sew on the line between 1 and 2. To set your machine up for paper piecing, you want to set it where your stitch length is very small. So I am setting mine to 1.6 for my stitch length, and I have my open toe foot on so that I can see when I put this under the lines, like so. You can see them very easily like this. So I've walked over to my machine carrying this very carefully because this piece is not attached. Now you can pin it, but I've learned that just takes a lot of time. Here you can see through the light how much over this line my fabric is. So there's my line, and I am over it by well over 1/4 of an inch, which is exactly what you want. Now all we're going to do is put this under the machine, and we're going to drop the needle just past the line between 1 and 2 right here, and I'm just literally I am right on the other side of this line, and then I'm simply going to sew on that line right through the paper, fabrics, to sew on it. And once I get to the end of it, we'll take one stitch past it and then stop. Now that is sewn on. I know you probably can't see that, but it is sewn on. So now we're going to go back over to my table and we are going to fold this piece over and we're going to trim it up. Here's where we use our little piece of cardboard. We are just going to place our cardboard on the line that we just sewed, and then we're going to fold this up, lining up over the top of the cardboard and folding it over. Then take your ruler with your 1/4 inch seam marked really clearly, and you're going to line up so that your 1/4 inch lines, the start of it right here, lines up on that piece of paper. And then you're simply going to trim off the remaining fabric. Like so. That gives you a beautiful 1/4 inch seam right there. Now we are going to get ready to add our next piece by folding over the green that we just added, and we're going to press that over like so. And yeah, you iron your paper and everything, it's just fine. Now we're going to get ready again to add our second piece. And to do that again, we're going to scoot up to the next line, the line between 2 and 3. We just move up in succession. Use your cardboard box, lay it on that line, take your fingernail and crease this upwards like so, and then fold it over down like that. Put your ruler on top again and trim off the excess fabric. And now you have a 1/4 inch seam that is right ready to line up your next piece of fabric, which for me, it is cream. Put this piece on and check it real quick in the light. But to do that, I line up with this edge right here, fold it over doing a pretend 1/4 inch, like so. And then I just hold it up to the light and look and see if I make it over the next one, and I do. So this piece is perfect. So now I am simply going to pick it up carefully and carry it over to my machine, holding these two pieces together. And then I'm going to sew on this line between 2 and 3. And I've carefully carried it over to the machine, making sure that my fabric hasn't moved. I'm going to drop my needle just a hair before the line between 2 and 3 and sew straight across the line. This is why this is so accurate, because you're literally sewing on the lines of the paper. How can you get it crooked or mess it up? You really can't. Now I do want everybody to notice, you see this piece of white paper? Technically, I would have been way better to have scooted this piece down more. It does cover my 1/4 inch seam allowance on my paper right here, and that's what I'm really wanting to make sure that I cover. So what it's missing is this extra piece of white that's right here. However, I'm okay, but be careful with that you're always covering this 1/4 inch over here. Let's go back over and fold and trim and get the next piece ready to go on. There's the piece we just sewed on, and we are going to press it. Down, and next we are going to look at our seam between 3 and 4. Again, you're just constantly working up. We sewed this one, this one, and now we're on to that one. Let me show you how the add a quarter ruler works. You use your narrow side instead of the piece of cardboard. So there's our piece of cardboard, and before we folded that down and used our fingernail and flipped it over. Well, the add a ruler is exactly the same, except for when you get to the adding the 1/4 of an inch, you do not have to get your big ruler out and measure from here, because it's got the 1/4 of an inch already built into it. And so all you do is just lay it down and scooch it to where it stops, because it literally will stop on the edge of the paper. Once you get there, then you simply trim off everything that's left over. Like so. It says my next color I need is red. So I'm going to line up this piece right here and cut off enough to cover all of this. And sometimes you have to look at it from the front, and sometimes from the back is good enough, but always make it to where it's lined up at least a 1/4 of an inch over every way you need to go and before you trim it. And so right here I can feel my paper is where I'm going to cut to get my piece. No precise cuts needed to do this. And it gets laid down right sides together, because once you've done your first one, everything goes right sides together. A quick test to make sure I have it placed properly by folding over that 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to scoot it this way just a little bit. There. And that is where I know I need my piece to go. And it is simply going to line up on this piece that we just cut, and we're going to carry it over to the sewing machine oh so carefully and sew on the line between 3 and 4. I'm going to go do that, and I'll be right back. Now I've sewn on the line between 3 and 4, and we're going to fold it over and press it just like we have all of our other pieces. And now this piece is finished. I've sewn a 1, 2, 3, and 4. I've sewn between this line, and this line. Now it's just simply a matter of trimming off the excess paper around it. My advice to you is to not tear the paper off your actual blocks until you're right ready to sew all your paper piecing pieces together. But you definitely can trim it down, which is what we're going to do right now. So line up on your outer edges right here. That's your 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and you want to line your ruler up on it and just cut everything. Paper, fabric, all of it off. My pattern has that it should be cut with these little corners like that, and so I'm going to do that with mine right now. Angles and everything already in there for you, just like that. It's just fantastic. It's why I love paper piecing. For all the other pieces in your pattern, you're going to do it exactly the same way. This is my second piece, or B2 piece, which will join to this when this block is finished and come together like that. At any rate, I'm going to start with B1, I am going to put B1 piece always right side up, and then every other piece will go on right sides together with that first piece. And I'm going to sew on line 1, add the green, sew on line 2, and then add the beige, and sew on line, there isn't another once you add the line, sew on the line between 2 and 3, and then just continue on with all my pieces. It doesn't matter if this one is a little triangle. I still will put on piece C1 first on the back side of my paper, face up, and then the remaining pieces will go on face down. My C2 piece is green. It's going to line up right on this tiny little line, but it's going to go all the way over to here, which you have to pay attention to with your pattern. And then C3 will line up right there. No matter which shapes you're sewing, cover it 1/4 inch all the way around for every single piece, at least, if not more, because you know you trim it down. And then always start with piece 1 and it goes face up. A couple of more hints. A quick way to find the size of the piece that you need to cut is to lay it on so that you can see this, and then measure at least 1/4 inch over, and then fold it the same way so that you can see that you have 1/4 inch over on that side. If you finger press it, then you know exactly the size piece that you need to cut, because you have this nice little finger press line. Again, these cuts don't have to be perfect. You just cut away. Here's another hint. When you're sewing angles like these are, always scoot your piece up. It looks like it would be right to put it here, but it is not. And the reason is, watch what happens when I make a pretend 1/4 inch. It misses all of this. To get it to catch all of that, all you have to do is scoot your piece up to where this is right at the very corner right here. And then when you fold it over, the difference is huge. It covers the entire thing. So slanted, or pieces that are cut on an angle like these are, make sure you move your piece upwards on that angle. One more hint. Let's say that your piece of fabric that you have will cover it, but only if you put it this way or straight across, and your line or your line that you're sewing on is right here diagonal. This is easy fix. Let me show you how we're going to do this. So we're going to glue it down on the back side of our paper, making sure I have E1 there. Obviously right side up. I'll put a little bit of glue here, just like always. Now, before I add my next piece, because this is plainly going straight and my line's going like this, all I need to do is fold up on this line and fold it over, and then cut my 1/4 inch seam allowance before I go on to my next piece, which is piece number 2. That way I have the perfect 1/4 inch to line up on for my next piece. Even though I started with a perfectly straight piece, now it's not straight anymore. So I wanted to show you sewing, paper piecing, a very odd shaped one, and it's going to work exactly the same. And this is what this will turn out like once it's trimmed up. Look at these points and look at that perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance to allow that point to stay. This is the amazing thing about paper piecing. What's sewn together and looks like this once it's trimmed down is this exact block right here. Super fun. Thanks for joining us on this quick tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you start paper piecing. It's so much fun and so exact. Bye.